Okay, there's a book which called The Doors of Perception, Aldous Huxley. And this book kind of kicks your brain, and then there's books that kick the door open, like walk into like your mental, like living room. Like for example, look at your like furniture, and say like, bro, you have been living inside like a tiny rented box called normal life. And all those, like Huxley's The Doors of Perception is one of those books published in 1954. And it's not exactly a drug book, not exactly like a philosophy book, but not exactly like a spiritual diary, and definitely not a casual, like so-called I tried, something weird and here's what happened story. It's more like, like a field report from a man who looked at flower and, came back acting like he had just interviewed God in a garden chair. So yeah, like author was writing this book while he was under some shit, like smoking some shit, or yeah. And the crazy part that he kind of makes you like believe him. And the setup is simple because Huxley takes so-called, not so-called, some sort of like a drug compound connected with another shit under observation. Yeah, he's not like some drug addict, but like academic drug addict. Let's call it this way. And like very clinical, very calm, not like some chaotic, like a rock star, and like a hotel room, for example, episode with broken lamps and someone yelling. I can smell the color purple, but no, this is like like a smart, highly educated British writer sitting in a room looking like at flowers, books, furniture, like fabric, walls, cars, trees, and like suddenly realizing that ordinary things are not like ordinary at all. It seems like it started his hallucination, and that is the whole shit hidden in the book, but useful shit, that reality does not change, his perception change, and that is much more dangerous, because if reality changed, you could blame the drug, the weather, the room, the like experiment, this like for example stars or whatever. But if perception, for example, changes, then the uncomfortable question shows up. What else have I've been missing, like while sober, busy, like practical and proudly so-called normal? And that is where the book becomes badass. And not because it says like take drugs and become like enlightened, but because that would be the cheap reading, the lazy reading, the like TikTok comment section reading. But the stronger point is this: that human beings are trapped inside useful perception, because we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as much as we need to survive, like pay bills, avoid traffic, answer emails, pretend we understood like a group chat, and not put the milk in the like washing machine. Like in other words, most of the time like a brain running in condition which just make our ass survive. And our brain is not like, a cinema screen, it's a bouncer. It stands like, at the door of like reality and says like, you useful information, come in. Or like you deep cosmic beauty of like a chair leg stays outside, we have taxes. So yeah, brain decides what kind of shit it should pay attention to or not. And Huxley borrowed this like idea from like a thinkers like Henry, for example, Bergson and C. Broad. The brain may work less like a generator of like a consciousness and more like a reducing valve, And in simple words, maybe your mind is like a capable of receiving much more, than everyday life allows, but your nervous system filters more of it so you can function. And that is terrifying in one hand and beautiful at the same time, because imagine like waking up, for example, tomorrow, right, and truly seeing your kitchen spoon, not like a spoon, metal, used for cereal, no, but like seeing the spoon as a shining object with curves, reflections, history, matter, light, shape, silence, like a tiny moon for soup, or like a silver candle for oat flakes, or like a little metal witness to your like a morning depression. And you would either become, like a poet, or like be late for work forever. And that exactly Huxley's problem. He looks for, like at flowers, and they like stop being flowers. They become existence showing off. Or like, for example, he looks at books and they glow with ridiculous significance. He looks a chair and like chair legs, and they become like almost holy. Or for example, he looks at his trousers and the folds and the fabric become like whole universe. And now to a normal person this sounds like insane. Bro started at pens and discovered infinity. So in other words, under this kind of shit, brain paying attention to the things when you normally don't give a fuck. And that's fair, but think about it. Have you, like, for example, like never had a tiny version of this? For example, you're walking, let's say, like at night after rain, and street lights like reflected on the pavement for 2 seconds. The city looks like a movie, and you stop hating your life. You don't solve anything. You're just in the moment. You're just admiring the present situation. Your bank account is still disrespectful, your messages is still unanswered, but the world suddenly looks expensive. Or let's say, like, you're drinking, for example, like a coffee alone in the morning, but the sunlight hits the ball like in a stupidly perfect way. Like nothing happens, but something happens. You feel the scene. In other words, you starting to notice simple shit, and you start to be more you start to more appreciate the present situation, not the meaning, but the scene itself, or like for example you hear like an old song, like let's say in a supermarket, and suddenly you are 12 years old again, standing in some like room you forgot existed. Especially with the music, it's very makes sense when the music, when you, for example, listening in your childhood, and somehow you end up listening while you like adult, you start to remember details when you was experiencing in childhood, like for example remembering a smell, a person, a summer, like a version of yourself, who had like no idea like how life, for example, would become like this weird. And that's the door. Huxley just opened it violently. And most of us, get a crack in the wall. He got, for example, the whole damn wall removed. And one of another, the funnest, like the sharpest part of the book is how Huxley realized that human ego looks ridiculously when viewed from like this kind of altered state. And at one point he looks at a portrait of Cézanne and basically starts laughing at the seriousness of human self-importance. Like, for example, look at us, tiny creatures with opinions, grudges, haircuts, LinkedIn bios, gym selfies, spiritual quotes, and very like a confident wrong takes. We act like, the universe has been waiting for our like a hot opinion about everything. But Huxley sees this and cracks up. And honestly, that may be one of the most like a practical lesson in the whole book. That your ego is useful, but it's also, like a clown wearing a crown. In other words, your ego think of itself too much, like overestimating his own abilities. And yeah, you need an ego to pay rent, protect yourself, like to set boundaries, build like something, say no, like negotiate salary, choose like a decent socks. Okay, fine, but when the ego, for example, like becomes like a king, life turns ugly. And suddenly, everything is about like reputation, comparison, like a winning imaginary arguments, like proving you are smart, or like looking successful, like looking like a deep, looking unbothered while being very bothered. People, don't just live anymore; they perform living. They pretend to be someone else, like they pretend to be. They're living someone else's lives instead of like learning their own personality. And someone goes to the gym not only to train but to prove they are, disciplined. Someone reads book not only to learn but become like the type of the person who can mention books. Like, these kind of people who like to quote things, but they not actually deeply understand what the fuck they're saying. Or like, for example, someone travels not only like to experience a place, but to post evidence that the main character with the passport, like, in other words, just in order to flex. And Huxley's altered, perception looks at that and says, Okay, cute little monkey, very dramatic. And that is not an insult, it's liberation. Because, yeah, it's a good way actually to put it when you're insulting someone. I'm not insulting you, but I'm liberating you. So, because the second, you see like your ego like as a performance, you can like stop obeying it so blindly. Because the moment when you stop stop approaching yourself too serious and start to being more like critical, you can be more objective. You can ask like, do I actually want this, or do I want to be seen wanting this? Am I angry, or like, for example, am I protecting my character? Am I making a decision, or like, am I trying to like keep my personal movie plot consistent? In other words, just to separate what exactly you need and what you think you need, but not actually you need it. And that's a strong medicine from this book, not like no like a pharmacy needed for this shit. Another like insight from it, that people are hungry for like escape, and Huxley, doesn't judge this hunger like some boring like moral lecture. He says in effect that humans have always wanted doors out of ordinary selfhood. Things like religion, music, dance, like festivals, alcohol, tobacco, or like, for example, drugs, like art, prayer, sports, cinema, that kind of shit. Different doors, but the same hunger. Yeah, different doors of the same hunger. That's a good way to put it. In other words, we want like some sort of like relief from being ourselves. Not always, because like ourselves are terrible. Sometimes just because being like one person all day is exhausting. For example, you wake up as yourself again, same name, same face, same unread responsibilities, same like a brain opening like 34 tabs before breakfast. And of course, people like want to escape. Anyone who says they don't is probably escaping through like another like productivity podcast and calling it discipline. The question is not like do people seek escape. Of course they do, but the real question is like which like escapes make you smaller and which escapes make you larger. I think we're talking about, in other words, about like a coping mechanism. And that is where the book becomes extremely modern, because today we have more artificial paradises than Huxley could have imagined, because you don't need payout, you have infinite scroll, and you don't need a mystical ritual. You have a phone that can sedate you in 4K, or you don't need alcohol to disappear from yourself. You can, for example, binge like a 10 episodes, order food you don't want, watch people argue online about something that will not matter in like 48 hours and call it so-called rest. In other words, escaping this kind of like TV show, like all social media shit. And listen, not all escapes is bad. A good movie can clean your soul a little. A night walk can save your like mind. A stupid comedy clip at the right moment can prevent prevent emotional collapse. And the problem begins when escape becomes not a door, but a basement. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. That when you gotta approach escape not like a solution, but like a temporal relief. A good door, for example, lets you turn stronger, and a bad door keeps you, hiding, because that distinction is brutal. And after reading, for example, like a Huxley, you start judging your like a habits differently, not like more moralistically, but like functionally. Does this, for example, make my perception richer or poorer? Or like, let's say, after 2 hours on like social media, do I see the world more like a clearly, or do I feel like my brain has been microwaved in jealousy sauce? Most likely it's the second one. Or like, for example, after like a conversation with this person, do I become more alive, or do I feel like someone stole my oxygen with a smile? Or like, for example, after alcohol or another stupid shit like gambling, or like endless news or fake productivity videos, do I return to life with more presence or less? So in other words, you compare inputs and outputs, what you did and what kind of like a result you get after. And if it's like, make you better, just keep doing that one, and stop doing another negative shit. And that's the, practical test. But the door, either opens into like a wider world, or like it opens into a smaller cage with better lighting. And Huxley's, ideal is not like, permanent so-called intoxication, but in fact he sees like the danger clearly, under this kind of drug. Action becomes difficult. The world is so fascinating that practical life feels irrelevant. And that is beautiful for like hours, and disastrous like as a life strategy. For example, imagine like telling your boss, I didn't submit the report because a chair leg revealed suchness. Yeah, that's the good way to kick your ass from your job. Maybe spirituality, but bosses don't like give a fuck about your spiritual shit, and professionally not great. This is the tension, contemplation versus action, seeing versus doing. Or like, for example, the mystic wants to sit like with eternity in a flower. Or like the plumber, has to fix the sink, or like the baby needs food, and the rent is not impressed by your cosmic insight. And Huxley knows this, and that is why the book doesn't end with a simple, so-called vision is everything, but he's too intelligent for that. He sees that the highest, human goal is not just to escape the self, but to return from that escape with better behavior. Not just, I saw the divine light, but am I less cruel now? And not just, I felt unity with existence, but can I bring, for example, someone a cup of water when they're sick. And that is, like a difference between a tourist or transcendence as a serious human being. Like, for example, a tourist wants the peak experience, right? A serious human asks what the peak experience demands afterwards. And that is why, this book hits harder than many, modern so-called expand your consciousness conversations, because a lot of, modern spirituality is just like ego with incense, and people, collect awakenings like sneakers. They say, like, I'm beyond judgment, then judge like everyone who's not beyond judgment. And they talk about, energy while like being impossible to live with. And they also preach presence while checking who watched their story. And Huxley's book is stranger, cleaner, more honest, It says, like, yeah, consciousness can open, and reality can appear infinite. Yes, the ordinary world may be soaked in meaning, but if that doesn't, eventually make you more humble, more attentive, or like more compassionate, and then maybe you just had a luxury hallucination, a very, aesthetic one, but still. So now let's talk about the funnest everyday application, like looking properly. Most people, don't look at life. They label it, like a tree, car, wall, wife, husband, etc. And labels are efficient, but they also like a little coffins, Once, for example, you label something, you stop seeing it. For example, you see, like, my apartment, not the strange fact that you live inside of a box of walls, fill it with objects you choose during different emotional eras of your life. Or like you see so-called old man on bench, not a whole universe of childhood regret, victories, secret memories, bones, silence. Or for example, you see a cashier, not a person who may be surviving a private war while like scanning your bananas. Or like, for example, you see traffic, not like sound of metal capsules full of separate human dramas, all moving under like a red lights, like a badly organized migration of shiny beetles. So you get the point, yeah. You just not see what you see, but you try to understand the whole context, or the whole puzzle, And this author's experience with this drug breaks the label machine, and even without drugs we can train a softer version of that. For example, try this. Once a day, look at the ordinary thing for 30 seconds without naming it. A cup, for example, like a door handle, even your hand, a jacket on a chair, or like rain on glass. And don't think like instantly, for example, cup, right? Look at colors, like a shadow, weight, texture, age, shape, that kind of details. And at first your brain will say, okay, bro, this is stupid, yeah, but that's because your brain is like a tired, office manager. Ignore it. And after a while, like something shifts. The, for example, object becomes less dead. Not like magical exactly, but like more present, and like weirdly you become more present too, because you're not instantly jumping to the labels, but you also paying attention to these kind of like details. And this is not childish, it's like actually like high level attention, because children, have it naturally. Artists fight to recover it. Mystics, for example, build like entire like a discipline around it, and adults lose it, and then like pay more money to sit in retreats where someone tells them to breathe and notice a raisin. The raisin was always there, which is became too important to notice it. And there's also like a savage anti-consumerist reading of the book. Huxley sees shiny cars and laughs because they look absurd, like advertising dreams are made ridiculous, and this is still, painful current. Modern life is full of, polished nonsense. We, for example, surrounded by objects designed to seduce perception, not deepen it, like phones, cars, packaging, etc. Everything is shiny, not everything is alive. And Huxley helps you feel that like a difference. A flower in a cheap vase be more, for example, real than like a luxury, showroom, or like, for example, a shadow like on a wall may contain more like a beauty than a shopping mall, or like a quiet conversation may be more transcendent than like VIP, experience with a terrible music and expensive insecurity. And this is not like anti-money. Money is useful. Poverty is not spiritual. It's often just like like a stress with a bad lightning. But Huxley reminds us that perception cannot be outsourced to expensive objects. You can buy, for example, like a better like scenery, and like, for example, still bring like a dyed eye to it. And that is why some people travel to beautiful places and only complain about Wi-Fi, because they only fucking focus to the one stupid shit, and because of that they like a blind to other beautiful details. They're standing, for example, in front of mountains, but their perception is still in customer support mode. The door, is closed from the inside, and the book, like also, makes art feel more serious, because Huxley talks about like famous artists, drapery, flowers, landscapes, but the point is not like art history flexing. The point is that like artists sometimes see what the rest of us is missing. Yeah.